In Chapter 2, we learn how to evaluate nutrition information. One thing we need to realize is that in the world of nutrition, there are so many conflicting pieces of information. One day this diet is so fantastic, and the next day that particular diet is not good for you. Or should we cleanse? Or, does that really work or not? There are so many different types of things that we hear from different sources in the media that we're not sure what is real and what isn't. So the purpose of this, whole chapter is kind of understanding about the field of nutrition and how you have to really learn to discern between the material that's hype and the material that's fact. So when we're talking about understanding what's going on in the nutrition world, we have to understand that in the past, people got facts based on their intuition, based on their common sense and wisdom, or short stories that they used to hear. They really didn't do any scientific research per se to verify their findings. But in today's world, nutrition experts really rely on scientific research, and they use something called the scientific method. And if you've taken any courses in the science curriculum, you should be familiar with the scientific method because that's what's used in all of the laboratory experiences that you may have. If you have not taken any of those courses, and this will give you a brief introduction, we're not going to get too much into the laboratory experience, even though your chapter does, because this course does not have a lab requirement. But if you're using the scientific method, very briefly, the steps are: you make an observation, you formulate a hypothesis, you review other studies, you design your own study, you analyze the data, you share your results, and then, if needed, you conduct more research. In a nutshell, that's a scientific method. So if I were to give you an example, let's say I'm a person that is in the research world, and I make an observation that 2/3 of this population is overweight and obese. And I start questioning that, thinking, well, why? And, what can we do? How can we change that? How can we, start having people lose weight? So these are things, the observations that I'm making. Then I formulate a hypothesis and say, well, I believe that if an individual will cut calories 500 a day and increase their exercise, they should be able to lose a pound per week. That's my hypothesis. Cut your calories 500 per day and increase your exercise and burn calories another 500 a day, you could lose at least 1 to 2 pounds a week. So I start looking at other information out there and see what other research is done, and then I design a study. Studies can be designed in so many ways. Your book talks about a lot of them. As I said, we're not getting into all those studies for the purposes of this course. But once I design my study, and whatever type it is, perform tests, I collect data, I start analyzing all of that, and I can draw conclusions based upon it. Once I feel confident that my research is valid and reliable, I can share that with peers. And if it's accepted research, it can be published. If not, I'd have to go back and do some more. So that's it pretty much in a nutshell. And as this graphic depicts, epidemiological studies are just one example of the type of studies. And if you're interested more in that, you can read more in the text about the various type of studies and the different key terms that you need to use in the science world. But when we analyze data and draw conclusions, reporting our findings, etc., we do that because we want to get published in scientific articles. In order to get into a scientific journal, in order to get published, have your scientific article be published in a scientific journal, it has to go through something called peer review, meaning that there are peers in your field that are very respected, and they will do a critical analysis and determine whether or not this can be published as scientific data. So no matter what happens, the reason, the point of all of this, peer review journal requirement is so important. It's because there's a lot of researcher bias. I might be so emotionally attached to my particular research that I'm not thinking clearly, and there might be some bias in there because that's truly my beliefs. I don't have any malintent, but my belief is so strong that I'm not seeing some of the reality. So having other peers review it helps to get or eliminate that researcher bias. And even though there are so many different tests and whatever, there's still conflicting studies out there. You hear them all the time. One day something is good, the next day it isn't. Eggs cause increase in cholesterol, stay away from eggs. And then the next day, no, but there's so many wonderful vitamins and nutrients in eggs. Don't, eliminate them totally because they don't really cause issues with cholesterol. So no matter how much the studies are, you have to realize that the nutrition is a evolving science. It's continually changing. So most important for you is you need to become an educated consumer. Don't assume that all the information in popular media or in the internet or whatever is reliable. Be aware that there's going to be some products and testimonials and stories that are just done because people are getting paid to do it, right? So if you look at a certain magazine like Men's Health or Shape, you can get information in there, and some of it can be valid, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it is. It could be somebody's opinion. Or if you're looking in the New England Journal of Medicine or the Journal of Nutrition, those have to go through that peer review process, and they are valid and they're reliable and they can be trusted more so than the general information for the lay person. So point is, be an educated consumer. And the next part we're going to get of this chapter, we're going to get more into that.